Hello and welcome back to IllumiNation, the Disney Lorcana podcast. My name is Max.
And I'm Sam.
And we are back at you. It's episode 62 of the podcast, and we are talking about the metagame for the new set, Wilds Unknown. Couple things up front. One, core construct is what we're talking about. If you're looking for infinity programming, I think you have a variety of places to look. I know a lot of folks are pretty tight-lipped right now about Infinity because the DLCs are coming up and everybody's brewing and trying to keep their secrets secret. But I do think that there's a lot of info you can glean, and hopefully this episode will give you some idea of kind of how to look at data that you're seeing over time. And second thing, this is going to be a lightly edited episode just because we had a lot going on. We just got back from a team member's birthday. We went away for a little weekend of games and fun. So shout out to Sabrina. Happy late birthday. I already said happy birthday on time, but you get an additional late birthday from the podcast. So moving into the metagame itself right now in Core Constructed. Wilds Unknown has really brought some cards to the forefront and I think has taken the metagame and shifted it a bit, but not a spectacularly large shift in this. So I would say first and foremost, the big takeaway from Sam and I looking over data, talking over what we're seeing, what she's been playing, because you've put in a few hundred games now.
Yeah, probably
with the new set.
200.
It's a lot of games, plus locals and all kinds of other outside testing and things. So it's a lot of effort, and I wanted to look over kind of what things are going on because I have not been playing as much, and when I'm not playing as much, I want to come into especially a new metagame and kind of get an idea of what's going on and where should I focus my time and attention if I want to put in reps with a particular deck. So coming at this from someone who hasn't had a lot of time in testing and someone who has had a relatively high amount of time in testing, I think it gives us a good view on the format. And I think pretty suffice to say, looking at data, having conversations with you about what you're playing against, the thing to do, ramp on 2. Mm-hmm. It's looking like that's not much of a change from the last meta. We have, obviously, the Sapphire ramp cards. We have Tipo. We have Sail on 2. And we have the Amber suite of cards. We have things like Willow and Ham. Obviously, Lanterns out there. One of Huey, Dewey, or Louie, whichever one ramps. But you want to be playing something on 2 that can push you into a fast 4-drop. That seems to be a recipe for success in this format. Obviously, Amber being able to also combine those powers with a Kud Edamudi to be able to really explode or have another redundant replacement that also draws a card. Very strong stuff. So looking at that, kind of the best decks of the format in terms of early success look to be the Amber and Sapphire colors, usually paired up with Amethyst. That looks to be a winning formula. And I think there's a few reasons for that, and that's largely because we have these cards that help define the curve in these two color pairs. So we have our first drop, which is usually a support character, Elanwi and Amber. You have the Basil, or now, is it Fauna?
I think so.
In Sapphire, who is like a Basil. So 1 drop with support and is a 2/1. So these 3 cards all do that. Then on 2, you play your ramp card of choice, be it your Grandmother Willow, be it your Sail the Azurite Sea. And then on turn 3, you're playing a 4-drop in Blurple. You've been leaning on the new tool from Wilds Unknown, which is Merryweather. It's a 4/5/1 for 4 inkable that has Ward. So that card has been very good at coming down and sticking to the board. And if you are playing in the Amber colors, especially Amber Amethyst, you might favor something like a very fast Dale to come down. Use your Elanwi to boost your Grandmother Willow, potentially challenge with it, potentially just do something else powerful on the following turn, which both of them generally are turn 4 Elsa Fifth Spirits to exert, and then use either the Dale ability or use it in concert with Merryweather to remove problematic opening cards from the board, keep you with cards on board and keep your opponent at a minimum trying to play catch up. And these decks are very good at staying ahead once they get a little bit ahead. So both very troublesome to deal with. Trying to catch up and have 5-drop Hades come down is very difficult to deal with. I'm either giving you more cards to find answers, or I'm losing further on board and I have to pick which is the lesser of two evils. And then something like Demona to exert the rest of my characters and allow you to clean up with these big statted characters is no fun. It's a very winning formula, and we're seeing it play out that way quite a bit. Also seeing another card start to come into the forefront as a result of this kind of play pattern is the still consistent menace in the format, which is Under the Sea.
Yeah.
The aggro decks, obviously the Under the Sea decks, being a strong counter to these purple decks. I think that these tend to be pretty strong into some of what they're doing, especially into the amber strategy, because as big as your stuff can hit, it doesn't get any bigger strength-wise from Dale, so it is very susceptible to Under the Sea. Merryweather is kind of the stopper to that because you can't shrink her because of Ward. So you either have to be playing something a little off-kilter like Lost in the Woods and then Under the Sea, which is difficult. It's a lot of singing power you have to have stick on board through an Elsa and a Merryweather itself, and or you kind of have to figure out a way to deal with that card or put that card in check, i.e. like set up a Tramp 2 post-singing, something like that. But it just requires a lot of hoops to be jumped through that you didn't have to jump through previously because of something like Della's Moon Lullaby. So that kind of falling to the wayside a little bit against Blurple, but the Amber strategies do fall prey to this pretty easy. Dale goes Under the Sea, the Elsa goes Under the Sea, the Willow and the Elan, we all can get tucked. So that's not too bad. So we are seeing Dogs and Toys still very, very strong contenders in the format. I think in the best players' hands, you would see kind of this rise of Blurple and Dogs, because I think Blurple's the strongest deck, and I think Dogs is the strongest deck when it's played by somebody who really knows the deck quite well. So I think that these are the two stronger pillars of the format, and then obviously you have the mid-range decks in play to kind of keep things a little bit more honest. You have your Amber and Ruby pairing, which I was enjoying last set with the boost mechanic. We're also seeing it now getting tested with the toy strategy. You, of course, have Amber Steel and Amethyst Steel, who are boasting either quick starts that stay ahead on board through a little bit of steel disruption, or can just build up inevitability and get big statted characters down way ahead of schedule to give the opposing characters a little bit of trouble. So I think that formula is still in play. I do think that Steel falls prey to the fact that there are so many good stats right now, and on top of that, the Sapphire decks playing with a lot of Ward characters to fight not the Steel decks, but to fight the opposing Sapphire decks, because Let It Go is just such a ridiculous card right now in Core Constructed. I think stronger than it ever was in the first chapter.
I agree.
So those are really difficult matchups in general. So you and I looked over a lot of stats, looking over the format and kind of early tournament results, online results, things like that, as people are really trying to ideate and find out what this format looks like. And to no surprise, the strongest, like most winning decks tended to lean on these ramp strategies, using some kind of a powerful either linear curve out or just a very powerful combination of cards. So we see Blurple, the Amethyst, Amber. We also see a big jump up in the Sapphire Emerald deck. It's back once again. It got a really good tool by way of the new Milo Thatch, which is a 7-cost, 3-quester. It's like a 5/5. It's inkable, and it has Ward on top of the fact that it can do a really good impression of Pirate Basil if you discard a card. And if 2 cards went to the discard on this turn, you get to draw a card. And that's at the end of turn which happens to be at the same time as your Clarabelle, which means both abilities go in the bag, and you get to pull them out in whatever order you want. So if I have no cards at the end of turn, but I have a Clarabelle and a Milo Thatch, I get to draw 3 from my Clarabelle because you have 3 cards, and then I get to draw an additional card from Milo Thatch. Now, I have more cards than you. Oh,
Yeah.
really unfair.
Yeah, and being a ward character, it makes it really hard to deal with.
Yes, absolutely agree. So it is a tough metagame right now in terms of we're at the point in the rotation lifespan, I guess, if you want to call it that, where we're at the maximum number of sets, which means that each set's impact is usually the smallest it will ever be. So we have a few cards from each set. Some sets more than others, right? Like there's definitely Whispers in the Well. Whispers in the Well is a lot of cards from that set. A lot of good cards. A lot of good Amethyst cards. In general, a lot of good cards, but freaking Amethyst cards. So good. I love Amethyst. And I still get frustrated when I think about Cats and Demonas and how meta warping those cards are. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. So I think that those are really, out of the gate, some of the strongest things you can be doing. And I do think it supports our thesis of the best thing to do is ramp on 2, because it just feeds into you doing something in the opening that feeds into the transition from the opening game into the mid game, where in something like Infinity, you're trying to do something when you're opening that's so inherently powerful that you just win the game with your opening line sometimes. And I think that this is very, very apparent with cards like Diablo, where sometimes you just shift a Diablo, they can't deal with it, and that Diablo just carries through the whole game. And also I think that decks like Amber Steel Song really, really lean into this, because you can Cinderella, and then you can deal with their first character, draw a card, empty your hand, and then use that opening line of the first few turns to be able to go so light on resources you can immediately whole new world and then refill your whole hand again. And if your opponent's not doing that similar kind of strategy, they can fall behind because they're discarding cards and only recouping a couple of cards, where you're recouping as many as 7 cards. So your opening lines are so much more important, and your quality of card is so much higher in something like Infinity that you don't have to worry about things like challenging as much. And we see decks like the Snowfort deck come into play because you don't have to worry about it. Kurt Spice just won the Ink Infinity tournament with a Dogs deck that didn't have to worry about playing Dellas and Under the Sea, because you don't need to play those cards because there's nothing that punches back in Infinity. Mm-hmm. So I just play Dogs, run stuff out, quest, and I don't worry about getting rid of your board because your board's not full of punchers. You're just playing like 1/2/2 evasives and 1/5s for 4. It's like, I don't care about any of those things.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting to see that and then you kind of go into the natural transition of Ruby Amethyst, which is playing characters that are so big you can't shrink them, and then Under the Sea anyway, so I'm not bothering with that. I'll let my characters go to the discard, and then I'll return a bog. It's totally fine. So I do think that this format, however, core constructed, changes a lot, right? Like you couldn't get away with playing something like Dogs in that style. You need to have the interaction in the Under the Sea because opposing boards matter, stats matter. Like we're talking about a definitive card of the format being a 4/5 and how big of a deal that is, because it's a 4/5. So you can punch opposing 4Xs and survive, and then be able to do really crazy things in certain decks. Like I have definitely Merryweathered into Ohana and drawn 4 cards. That's happened. So you can do a lot of kind of dastardly things in core that you really can't get away with in Infinity, because in core the stats and what the characters are is sometimes more important than a character that's so absurdly powerful. It on its own can take over a game the way it can in Infinity. There's no Prince Johns, there's no Diablos in core constructed. That's an Infinity thing. So you don't set up these like, my openings literally set the table for the end game. That's not as much true anymore, as my openings set up what I want to do is use my openings to have the smoothest transition into the mid game, if you think about it that way. And we're seeing these decks do that, and that's why ramp has become, I think, even more important than it was even before Wild's Unknown, because we're getting to these cards that are very powerful, even just incrementally powerful, going to a 4/5 with Ward for 4 over something like Tigger, Isis, Vanderquack, or the 4-drop Demona. Not having a drawback like uninkable, not being able to ready if you have too many cards in your hand, or just being like a temporary solution with Tigger. You get this static character that can just be like, I'm playing Elsa next turn, you're going to have to figure it out. And that's very good. It's very hard to deal with. It's tough to break up, stuff like that. And it matters a lot more because the games are longer and grindier, and there's more focus on the mid-game in Core Constructed, and there's less of focus on the mid-game in Infinity. It's more going, who can do the more powerful thing really quickly that allows you to close out the game fast. Mm-hmm. If you think about it that way, and close out the game can be through inevitability too, i.e. something like drawing cards with Diablo, i.e. setting up B-Prep plus locations in Ruby Amethyst. These all move the game to the end game in a way or another. That's kind of how they do it. Where in Core, there's so much more of the game is spent in this chunky back and forth attrition fight in the middle of the game, vying for who can come out through that time span on top. So one big challenge or one big under the sea can really just change everything. I mean, you've been playing a lot of Amber Emerald toys. Yeah. And when you play in the mirror, usually it's a battle over one card. It's Under the Sea. Mm-hmm. Who's Under the Sea first? Are you sniping it with you're playing Mowgli's and Lenny, or are they trying to steal it with like their Ursula Mowgli package? Like who's trying to find it, who drew to it first, who's big tramping faster, trying to find the key card to just end the game on the spot. You're fighting over small characters as much as you can to try to, if they're exposed, to stop singing from happening, things like that. So the game is so significantly warped in the middle of the game because it's basically just a disruption battle over the hands, less so on the board, because once an Under the Sea happens, basically you're winning. Sometimes that's not true if you do it very, very fast. Like you can do it fast with the Woody shift line, and Dogs does it fast with the Lady shift line. That might not be enough of an impact, especially if you can't then follow up, because that does eat up a lot of your hand resources. Mm-hmm. Like you're not going to be able to just flood the board after a play that's that card intensive. So your opponent might be able to catch back up if they have the right sequence of cards. Like if I go like Nani into like a shift lady, something along those lines, I can get enough cards back that I can start to fight back into the game a little bit. So that's not quite as important, but Core is so much more predicated on this, and that's why we're seeing so much of a focus towards either a deck that's setting up a very powerful board state, like the Toys, Dogs, the Amber, and Emerald decks, or we're seeing cards that are just playing very strong characters that stick to the board far ahead of schedule in these Amber and Sapphire strategies. So there's a big mix, but all of them are trying to do the same thing, and that is utilize the opening cards to transition as quickly as possible into the mid-game, and then use a powerful either series of cards or a sequence in the middle of the game. After usually 5, 6, or 7 turns, you start to see a clearer picture of what's going on. They execute that strategy, and then you move into the end game. That's why Under the Sea and Demona kind of are the cards that matter the most in Core Constructed, because they're the two most singularly disruptive and board stall breaking cards in Core Constructed. I don't think you're really caring too much about either one as much in Infinity, though there obviously is like an Amber Emerald deck, one of my favorite decks that plays Under the Sea. There's seen Sapphire and Emerald decks get played this past weekend at some of the Infinity tournaments as well. So a little bit Under the Sea going on. But largely, Demonas and Under the Seas define Core so singularly because the boards get clogged, the attrition battle happens, challenging, either questing and singing. have to come to a halt because of challenging, and then you need something to remove characters from your opponent's board, and that's where these two cards really come in. So I think that's kind of how it looks. The pillars are largely the same. Aggro / whatever you want to call it. They're kind of like wide boards that play under the sea, if you want to call it that. That's our aggro deck. We have our mid-range decks, which are the ones that are playing characters on curve and being able to leverage things. And then you have your more controlling decks that are trying to just keep the board as contained as possible in the early portions of the game and the very early part of the mid-game, and then keep that strategy up and play singularly powerful cards to hold the fort down, or now some locations to kind of hold the board and gain lore that way to grind their win out. So not really different, a little bit more in the way of options, I think, on each pillar, but I think that rock, paper, scissors meta that really defines a lot of core constructed Lorcana is still very much in play here. So I think the easy advice for this is don't aim to play the best deck per se. I think the best thing to do is to play the deck that you are the most comfortable with, because you'll understand what to do in the matchups where your deck struggles. Look at the data, find out, what's my deck good into? What's my deck bad into? Is there anything that I can do that may be a little non-standard in those matchups to help me survive a little bit better? Or is there things I should lean on that do a little bit better I should hunt down in those matchups to try to help me? So keep that in mind. Definitely take a look at the meta. There's a lot of resources you can do so online. Keep an eye on it. Practice, know your lines. It's kind of the only way in this particular format that you're going to be able to
Keep questing.